Welcome to the Spaghetti Wall, the podcast where we explore mental health, happiness, and what it really means to live a full, healthy life.
We're your hosts. I'm Jason Wilcox, licensed clinical social worker.
And I'm Dr. Tansei Lee, licensed psychologist.
And every week we throw ideas at the wall of life and see what sticks.
This is the Spaghetti Wall.
Let's get into it.
We're diving into the power differential and the power paradox today. It comes from Motivational Interviewing for Leadership, MI Lead.
Okay, so to start off, quick note is power isn't good or bad, it's leverage. It's the capacity to influence towards a goal.
Exactly. In classic research by French and Raven breaks power into 5 bases. Legitimate, which is your role, reward, what you can give, and coercive, what you can take away. There's also expert, what you know, and referent, who you are, your reputation, and your relationships. So these 5 areas remind us that each has upsides and risks depending on how we use it.
The key takeaway is even if you don't pull rank, your title still changes the air in the room. That's the power differential, the inherent gap between a leader and the people they lead. It shapes how people speak up, take risks, and interpret your tone subconsciously.
So an example of this, I had an employee a long time ago who, when he was on the team as an employee, he was a great guy. Everybody loved working with him. They'd laugh and joke. But he got promoted and ended up becoming the supervisor of this team. And one day he came in and he was talking to me about him being a supervisor. And he was saying that it was kind of strange because he would say the same jokes and people wouldn't kind of engage with him the same. Or he would talk the same way before and people would act differently with him. And that's the day I said, welcome to the power differential. Because that's what he's running into. There's power dynamics happening here that when he was a colleague weren't there. And when he was a supervisor, now we're in play.
Oh gosh, I think that example is such a common thing that happens when people get promoted. I was in that situation too. And oftentimes the silence can be interpreted as apathy, but it isn't. It's vulnerability management. People start to sense that there's more at stake because the relationship has changed. So they route around you and they sanitize the truth or they avoid you.
And here's the trap. Leaders interpret that distance as disengagement or kind of like a clampdown, unknowingly amplifying that gap because leaders start having reactions to it or they start trying to control it in some way.
Absolutely. When I was in the position and I got promoted as a clinical supervisor, I had 12 clinicians under me and I started to feel distant and it wasn't a good feeling. So let's talk about some practical things from MI Lead that someone in this position can turn to. You can tune into 2 dials. So the first one is the volume of authority, which looks at structure, clarity, and decision-making. The second one is the base of the connection. So how loud, how robust is the trust, the safety, and the autonomy that you give the team.
In high repetition, safety critical work, you probably turn up structure. In creative, expert work, autonomy matters more. The sweet spot is contextual, and it moves. The key here is kind of understanding how influence and power works. When we apply so much power and control, we find that influence starts going down. So this is what we're talking about with this kind of sweet spot. The sweet spot is where we have enough of the power, the control, the structure, all of those things in place that the team member has what they need to be successful. But if we go past that point and start trying to control everything else, we lose our influence. And influence is critical because the second we lose influence with our team, we aren't going to be nearly as successful. Influence matters. So what we want to do is we want to bring that power dial, that volume of authority, as Tan was saying a second ago, we want to bring that up only to a certain extent to, again, help the person be successful at the job. Past that, we want to start using empathy and autonomy to allow the person to make choice, to own their work, And this is where your influence grows because the team member trusts that they have a safe environment to go to you to do the work, and you see more employee engagement. You see better outcomes. You see people with their morale starts going upwards. Everything goes in a positive direction this way. But again, you got to look at that sweet spot and look at how it applies with the work that you're doing.
Here's another example. Valerie runs continuing education seminars. Team members lightly adapt slides to fit the room. She locks it down. No changes without approval. No collaboration without her consent. The results, 2 people resign and the team's checked out. The power differential got amplified here and the initiative fell.
Do you hear that though? That's the control, right? The amplification. We're turning up too much control. And once you start turning up that control too high, influence is going to go down. Now, here's another one. So let's look at, let's say Jacob, a manager who notices his assistant, Lisa, struggling with meeting minutes. Instead of reprimand, he collaborates. So he goes in with curiosity, saying things like, what's getting in the way? They relocate tasks and performance pops. Differential reduced, ownership rose. So we're looking at when we bring in creativity, we bring in the empathy, we still have structure, we still have authority, but we're giving a lot of autonomy and support and figuring out how to help this person be successful in the environment.
That's a great example opposite of Valerie. So let's look at what's different between Valerie and Jacob's approach. Valerie's approach triggers threats and compliance, where Jacob's evoke autonomy and competence in the team.
Right. And so MI Lead, what it's doing is it's giving leaders concrete micro skills to allow Jacob to have the outcomes that we're looking for. Right. We're looking at things like having the spirit of motivational interviewing for leadership, which is our partnership, our acceptance, compassion, empowering, and using the skills of ORs, our open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. You'll hear us weave those throughout when we talk about it. What they're doing is they're basically trying to help you, these skills, they're helping you go in with the ability to know how to keep the autonomy, keep the person involved, and increasing your influence while still holding your authority as a leader.
Yeah, in the example with Valerie, she definitely is able to apply some of these MI lead skills if she were to pause and gauge the structured decision making. Is this a high authority thing or is this a high autonomy situation? For having people create slides, that seems like more of a creative task where autonomy might provide empowerment.
Now, the tougher pattern, the power paradox, as influence grows, like we've been talking about, empathy and curiosity can shrink. The very traits that got you promoted, listening, humility, collaboration, get displaced by self-protection and control. Trust erodes and performance follows.
So, what are the counter moves? Make empathy very deliberate and observable. So, we ask you to ask before you tell, reflect before you direct, share the why, then co-design the how, and connection before correction.
You know, what we talk about in all of this is all within the MI Lead framework, right? It's where we're nurturing ownership across multiple departments. The antidote is that we're trying to look at how to advance others' interests to increase their true influence. Again, that's the antidote. That's what we're trying to build. I do want to take a quick side note here, though, because we've brought up empathy a couple times, and recently I've been hearing it more and more. There's articles and people talking about how empathy is destructive and it's this bad thing, that you shouldn't use it. I think what people don't understand that are saying that, though, is they don't understand that empathy without accountability creates enabling. And I think that's more of what they're talking about, because empathy, when you really hold empathy in a space with accountability, it's powerful. And when you're a leader and you're holding empathy and accountability, then you're going to have a lot more influence, because empathy connects you with the person. Accountability holds a structure, holds somebody to move forward and to engage with you. You need both. But again, you lose the accountability, you're going to end up enabling.
That's a great point, Jason. And I do think and I believe that for leaders, we first have to lean in before we can pull the team towards the mission, the structure. I think people do like structure because structure provides safety, but it can't be this rigid clamp down where people feel like you're micromanaging them because that just reduces engagement and reduces team morale.
Right. There's a reason why there's a saying out there that says people don't quit their jobs for the job normally. It's because people quit because of their boss, their leader.
All right. So let's take a practical kind of calibration of this. Um, is your team's current sprint high structure, where we're looking at need for compliance, safety, and repeatability? Or is your team really needing high autonomy, where the work is really about creativity, their expertise? And so this is where we're really needing leaders to pause to name what type of work and environment you are dealing with your team. So step 2, we're going to have to adjust the dials. If the structure is essential, you want to raise clarity, meaning making things clearer, defining what needs to be done, providing sequencing and timing. However, if autonomy is essential in the job, we want to raise choice, allowing methods to be discovered, pacing, allowing them to discover the pacing, exploring problem solving, as well as brainstorming as a team.
I would just add one thing about step 2 really quick, because what we wouldn't want to convey here is someone that leans towards micromanagement. They might hear this and go, oh, see, it's justifiable. I need to have a tremendous amount of structure and oversight on my team. The goal is to give as much autonomy to the team as is appropriate. You're trying to find everywhere that you have to have the structure, you have to have the policy, you have to have those things, and then you're looking everywhere you can to apply autonomy to it. Because the more an employee has the autonomy for choice, the more they're going to take some ownership of the work. The more they're going to feel great about what they do, which only increases your influence.
Yes, Jason, I love that you're bringing that up because we're going to jump into, and hopefully you can provide some verbatim language, because I think the way we deliver our message and the way we encourage folks to collaborate and engage with us and the words we use are really important. So could you share some, statements, some curiosity questions that you would recommend in helping engage team members?
Oh, absolutely. So let's look at a formula, right? So we want to look at going back to our ors and our skills that we talked about earlier, right? So if we're engaging people, we want to get really curious. So we might use things like open-ended questions. For example, what would make this easier to execute this week? Or, hey, what's going on? What do you find are the barriers to what you're doing in your job? We might use summaries to summarize whatever's going on when we're talking about problems and issues or how we're going to go forward. So we might say something like, so the outcomes are A, B, C, and you want to own X. You'll need, and then we identify it. But what we're identifying here when we summarize is we're pulling all the information that we've gathered from the person and we're summarizing it into a nice little package to help them see what they've already identified and how we're moving forward. Other tools that we could be using here is reflecting, right? So reflective listening is when we are going to give information back to them that they've given to us. We're going to give more context back to them though. So if they have a tone in the voice that sounds like they're angry, or they allude to there's a lot of stress in the job or frustrations, we're going to want to reflect back this information to them. So reflections might look like someone coming up and saying, oh my gosh, today is just, and we hear that. And so we might reflect back something like, there's something that's going on today that's really pushing your buttons, right? We're just giving information back. This connects with the person quickly. It helps them feel like you as a leader care. and you want to be involved. Again, raising your influence. But we're looking at ways to collaborate, to be curious, to find ways to give them that autonomy. So again, lean on your tools like open-ended questions, affirm them, use reflective listening with them, and summarize the key pieces that they're talking about, so that you're engaging what's happening in them. You're pulling from them to drive how we go forward within the structure that's been provided.
I also think it's important to focus on strengths. So, an empowering or empowerment open ended question might be, where do you feel most confident, and what small win might move us forward in what's needed?
Yeah, and that's a great example. You might use other things like, what's your draft plan, or what would you like from me? Or again, if we're going to focus on what you're talking about with the strengths, which is really critical. I mean, there's studies out there that show that employees, when we focus on strengths, we see them excel more in the environment. So when you start identifying strengths and pulling for the strengths, the employees can engage more. So it's a great example of what you're talking about. But we can ask those questions of, what motivates you? How do you want to move forward? What's working for you? What has worked for you in the past? And even highlighting their strengths, affirming them, saying, you did such a great job when you were connecting with that client. You did X, Y, and Z behaviors that worked so effectively. So yeah, pulling for those strengths, affirming those strengths, we're going to see more connection. We're going to see more engagement, and it's going to impact the environment in a really positive way.
The last step here is for us to really, really protect the voice of the people we're working with. Oftentimes people feel unheard, unseen. And so this one is really about ending the conversation with a checkout. You know, what did I miss? Where might my role get in your way? Or what's the red flag to let us know if we're drifting? So, as a summary, we want to make things simple, repeatable, and leader supported. So you're balancing this authority and connection in real time.
Yeah. And in summary of the steps, step one, we're identifying what kind of work are we doing in this work environment, right? Does it need more structure or less structure? We're always looking at as much autonomy as possible. So we're trying to find where that balance is. Step two, we're adjusting the dials, which is looking at, hey, how do we apply more of that structure or less? Where are we at? Step three, we're using the MI lead skills to reduce that gap, to reduce any issues so that we can have that good sweet spot, that fine balance where we have higher influence and only the structure that's needed. And step four, we're protecting that voice. We're making sure that we're allowing them to have a voice in this environment, in what's happening and what's going on. So a few phrases that are important to remember when we're talking about the power differential is, one, our amplifiers, things that start cranking up that volume, that start making it so people feel like we're controlling them as leaders. So things like if we say, just do it, or because I said so, or run that by me before you try anything. When we do these kinds of things, if you notice the tones, my control, if I say that to an employee, is really high. Remember, if our control is really high and we're trying to overpower them and raise that power high, our influence starts tanking. So those kinds of things will amplify it. They'll make that power feel too much for the employee, and we'll get them disengaged. Things that mitigate, we're looking at the MI lead skills like I talked about earlier. We're going to do things like actions would be stating something along the lines of, here's the outcome that's non-negotiable. How would you approach it? So if you notice what we're doing here is we're stating the structure. We're stating whatever the policy is, the rule is, whatever it is that we can't change. It just is. We state it, and then we move to the autonomy immediately by asking that follow-up question of, how would you approach it? How would we adopt this? How would we move forward to be in a really effective team? We also might do things like, I'm hearing 3 options. Which one feels most workable first? Again, do you see how we're guiding them to where their autonomy is and giving it to them? Maybe another one might be, if I'm over specifying, tell me where to back off. What we're doing is we're asking them to give us feedback where they feel like we're starting to take their autonomy. So those are some ideas and ways to use the MI Lead skills to impact that environment in a positive way.
So hopefully you guys are noticing the patterns and this term around amplifiers, right? Things that increase control and decrease engagement and autonomy does not work. However, these skills, mitigators, are able to help us firstly clarify the what needs to happen and also how do we apply autonomy and give autonomy in these situations. It is definitely a balance, and it's probably takes skills and training and insight and us pausing as leaders to really get to that sweet spot. Let's talk about some practical exercises that we can do. Number one, tune into needs and focus on connection lines and statements such as, what's one goal that matters to you this quarter and what's making it hard to get to? An exercise might be, schedule a 15-minute one-on-one this week with this employee and ask one question, listen fully, and give one reflection. Number two, balance authority and autonomy. Really intentionally give clarity and choice here. We really need this by Friday. Please pitch 2 ways to get there and which one you feel like you want to green light. Identify a low-risk task where the team can own their how and present the plan to you. Number 3, model compassion and collaboration. Assume positive intent. It sounds like you put in a lot of effort here and you hit 2 barriers. What did you learn from that? Run a 5-minute retrospective meeting where you're talking about these things, you're emphasizing wins, surprises, and the next steps. Number 4, challenge the power paradox. Ask for feedback as a way of best practice. What's one thing that I did last week that made your work harder? How did I get in the way? Lastly, use MI Lead skills every day. The OARS, OARS. Open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries.
These aren't soft skills. I hear it often. People talk about these skills and normally they're under the category of soft skills. And so when it's called soft skills, people just kind of blow them off and think they're a weak way to lead or that they're really not that necessary. But what's really important here to understand is these are force multipliers. This means that when you're applying these things, it makes you a stronger, more profound, influential leader. You're going to engage your team more. So they're not soft skills. These are critical skills. These are the things that make the biggest differences in the environment as you lead. They shrink the fear, surface truth earlier, and let expertise breathe. That's how influence goes up.
I know we've given a lot of information, and this can be very overwhelming if it's new to you. So I just encourage leaders where our listeners who resonate with some of these things or go, oh, wow, this is something I really like to practice. Check in with yourself. Take it slow. These aren't skills that you just go, oh, let me read about them, get some scripts, and I'm good to go. We all are learning. Just remember that progress isn't linear. Pause, check in with yourself, and apply what feels relevant to you. As we're ending this episode, here's a quick recap. Remember that power isn't bad. Unexamined power can be. See the gap in the power differential. Tune into the dials, things that you can amp up or tune down, and use the OARs to keep empathy and ownership high.
Exactly. Because again, remember, there's a sweet spot with power. Too much, you lose influence, which means engagement's going to go down. If you hit the sweet spot where you only put it to the level that engages the team and keeps it so that they have the structure they need so they know how to do the job, and give them as much autonomy as possible with empathy using the MI Lead skills, that's where we're going to see the influence start going up tremendously. Now, obviously, we only are just quickly scratching the surface here. If you ever do want more information, you can check out the book, MI Lead, Motivational Interviewing for Leadership. You can also go to our website, www.avidcounseling.org, And we have a video training where you can watch the videos that will go deeper into all of these skills. So there's resources. You can also reach out to us and get coaching, things like that. And we don't mind working with leaders. We love it, in fact.
That's it for today's episode of The Spaghetti Wall. If something in this session hits home, you're not alone. These are the kinds of real conversations we all need more of.
Seriously, relationships are messy. Healing is messy. And life, yeah, it's definitely messy. But that's exactly where the growth happens.
If you found this episode helpful, share it with someone you care about. And don't forget to subscribe. New episodes drop every week with real stories, honest insight, and practical tools.
And if you want to learn more about the work we do or are looking for support in your own relationship, head over to avidcounseling.org. We'd love to connect.
Until next time, keep showing up.
And stay curious.
And remember, the mess is the method.